Welcome to HFY Sci-Fi Love and War Story, where legends are born, not from conquest, but from courage. Where love survives through cosmic fire, and war reveals the soul behind the steel. Here, humanity is not just a name. It's a force the galaxy never saw coming. In a galaxy torn apart by silence and fear. They came from the void, unstoppable, ancient, merciless. And just when all hope seemed lost, something arrived. Not a fleet. Not an empire. Just one ship. And everything changed. They came from the dark and no one was prepared. The sky above Velmara cracked like broken glass, streaked with unnatural lightning that did not flash, but pulsed, rhythmic and cold. Once, this world had been the heart of a proud civilization, a final sanctuary in a galaxy already scorched by war. Now, it was only the last light, flickering before extinction. The Varnax had arrived. Not with fire. Not with sound. But with hunger, a silence that consumed. They came not in thousands, but in dozens, because dozens were enough. Each ship the size of a moon, shaped like a cathedral built for a forgotten god, hovering above the planet like a judgment held in suspense. They did not burn cities. They did not negotiate. They simply absorbed. Their technology defied all understanding. They wove black lattice fields across the upper atmosphere, energy nets that harvested light, heat, and biosignature alike. Entire layers of the stratosphere dimmed, and with each pulse, life below grew colder. In the streets of Velmara's capital, panic bloomed like blood from a deep wound. Evacuation transports screamed into the air, only to vanish into the nets, silent disintegrations, never reaching orbit. Families ran. Soldiers stood helpless. Every signal sent into the void came back twisted or dead. Communications were cut at the source, not jammed, not blocked, deleted. And above it all, the Varnax watched. Not with eyes, but with presence. With that slow, creeping certainty that you were no longer part of the living universe. That you had been written out. In a low shelter beneath the central evacuation spire, High Scholar Roloth, once a mind of interstellar diplomacy, now a gaunt figure in dusty robes, pressed a trembling palm against a flickering console. The holomap above him no longer showed allies, no longer blinked with friendly codes. Only black. Only silence. His aides had fled hours ago. The air was thin here. Each breath felt like a decision. Outside, the lurch of destruction continued, buildings folding inward, not from pressure, but from molecular starvation. Trees withered to ash. Rivers turned to sand. Even the winds seemed afraid to move. Roloth stepped slowly into the upper observatory, now a hollow ruin open to the void. The dome above had shattered hours before, and through it, he could see the great shadow of the Varnax Prime, its underbelly pulsating like a living wound. It made no sound. It emitted no signal. It simply was. He had studied them once. Stories from the dark past. An ancient race that did not trade, did not speak, did not care. Only consume. Adopt. And erase. Once, they were dismissed as myth. Now, they were here. Across the planet's far side, the Ternari Ridge Array, a planetary defense grid once hailed as impenetrable, was falling. Not from bombardment, but conversion. Its shields were reversed. Its power drawn away. Turrets turned on their own command towers. The AI Defense Corps had been co-opted in less than 7 minutes. The screams were broadcast for 4. After that, only static. In the north, glacier continents boiled. In the south, cities sank into the ground, not swallowed, but unraveled at the quantum level. Velmara was not being destroyed. It was being disassembled. And in the middle of it all, Roloth stood still beneath the open sky. His eyes dry, cracked from dust, watched as a second net formed above the last visible star. The light dimmed, then vanished completely. He was alone. And then, finally, he whispered, not to the sky, not to the gods, but to the silence itself. Is there no one left? No answer came. Only the distant, low thrum of the Varnax lattice field, expanding outward like the slow closing of a colossal eye. It had no flag. No allies. Just fury. Above the dying skies of Velmara, where the stars had once shone bright, the void twisted. On the fractured bridge of the last orbital outpost, a single radar console began to blink once, then again. A heartbeat. Not Varnax. Not local traffic. Something else. Contact, whispered the technician. Her voice cracked, too soft for the silence around her. She pressed the audio link. Unidentified object. Upper orbit. No IFF tag. No reply signal. The officer on duty turned, slowly. His eyes bloodshot, face dim under the red emergency lighting. Varnax? The technician shook her head. No energy signature match. No biological code. It's unknown. The orbital feed switched to external view. There, beyond the planet's shadow, a single ship hovered, motionless. Not massive. Not gleaming. Just silent and waiting. Its design was alien, even to those who had seen countless galactic fleets. The hull was blackened and uneven, as if grown rather than built, shaped by war, not by design. No insignia. No signal. Just a presence, like a dagger hanging in the dark. A whisper moved through the comms room. Who would fly alone into this? A relic? A scout? A ghost? The Varnax noticed. Their orbital fleet adjusted formation. The primary mothership, a monstrous structure of rotating rings and pulsing lattice veins, turned its focus toward the anomaly. A long, low-energy tone echoed through the sky. It was not language. It was a warning. The alien ship did not reply. Varnax sent a second signal, this time with more force, encoded threats, warnings of extermination, a show of strength. They even opened their central weapon arrays. Still, no response. Then the anomaly moved. Not with a gradual burn or a glide like the fleets of the old world. It shifted in a sharp, angular instant, a gesture that bent physics like paper. The stars around it blurred. Gravity wavered. Within a single second, the ship surged forward and opened fire. There was no sound in space, only light. The first shot was a magnetic rail discharge, a cobalt blue streak that traveled faster than most tracking systems could follow. It tore clean through a Varnax command ship, slicing it in two. Not an explosion, a surgical split, like a blade through bone. The halves drifted apart, still glowing. Seconds later, came the second strike, quantum destabilizers, blooming like violet flowers in vacuum. Varnax shielding, tuned to absorption and redirection, failed completely. Their capital ship's hull peeled back, layer by layer, as if unwound by invisible hands. Then came the impossible. The unknown ship shifted mid-motion, and what appeared to be gravity anchor fields flared from its sides, inverted gravity, pulling enemy ships into each other instead of away. Two Varnax vessels collided, rupturing in a silent blossom of metallic blood. The battlefield, once humming with Varnax superiority, turned still. Inside the command core of the Varnax flagship, alien officers stared at tactical displays, their bioluminescent skin dimming. No creature had ever pierced them this fast. No weapon had ever ignored their architecture. And no opponent had ever dared to fight them alone. Then the human ship transmitted a signal. It was not in words. It was a visual, a short loop. A recording of Varnax destroying Velmara's southern hemisphere, played backward. As if to say, now we undo. The war had shifted in seconds. No fleet. No army. No declaration of war. Just one ship. One purpose. One fury. In the stunned silence that followed, Captain Thress, watching from a shattered ground bunker, turned toward the sky. His voice barely audible. Who are they? A whisper answered him, not in sound, but in the rumble of the human ship charging another volley, its hull lighting up like a dying star. And then the Varnax returned fire. The battle had begun. And for the first time in centuries, the outcome was unknown. They thought it was madness, but it was math. The Varnax fired again. This time, not a warning, but a focused, furious barrage. Dozens of energy lances, each capable of melting through planetary crusts, raced toward the unknown warship. They converged from all angles above, behind, below a perfect kill box. And yet, nothing hit. The human ship didn't dodge. It anticipated. Each movement was surgical. Each rotation pre-calculated. As if it knew the Varnax playbook before it was written. The hull shimmered with adaptive energy, bending gravity, redirecting heat, distorting trajectories. To Varnax sensors, it seemed to phase between moments, slipping across probability fields like water avoiding cracks in stone. In the Varnax mothership, command nodes screamed warnings in cascading light. Their captain, a being bred from 1,000 generations of conquest, leaned over the control dais, mandibles grinding in frustration. "They're not following any known combat model," hissed his advisor. "Their vector path is erratic." "No," the commander growled, his voice low and bitter. "It's not erratic. It's deliberate." Inside the human warship, name still unknown, still silent, a network of minds stirred. Not crew. Not soldiers. But strategic AI, bonded like neurons, forming a synthetic consciousness. It did not think the way others did. It observed. It absorbed. It solved. Within 3 minutes of engagement, it had fully modeled the Varnax fleet behavior. Attack patterns. Shield lag. Power cycling. Reaction time down to nanoseconds. Then, it began to rewrite the battle. The ship fired again. But not at the mothership. Instead, it targeted communications relays, command synchronization arrays, and fleet coordination nodes. Varnax relied on collective neural sharing, a hive of data, shared instantly. The human AI found the frequency. Twisted it. And mirrored it back, with wrong data. Suddenly, Varnax destroyers saw each other as enemies. Shield codes failed. Defensive turrets opened fire on their own wings. In orbit, chaos bloomed. From the surface of Velmara, it looked like the Varnax fleet was eating itself. The human ship didn't stop there. It unleashed smart plasma bursts, woven with subatomic filaments that carried micro-latency lag infections, not damaging armor, but delaying reaction time. 1 second. Then 2. For a species that thought in collective time, it was a lifetime of confusion. Then came the most terrifying moment. The ship began absorbing. Not debris. Not weapons. But Varnax energy. The green glow of their bioplasmic drive cores shimmered toward the human vessel and vanished inside it. As if the ship was drinking their power. "They're using our essence," screamed one Varnax technician. "Our biofields are being converted. Converted into weaponized fuel. Converted into kinetic charges. Converted into light." Every blow the Varnax delivered became another weapon turned back upon them. The human ship moved through their formation like a disease of precision, carving paths not with brute strength, but with flawless logic. In the Varnax mothership, panic broke through discipline. The commander struck the table, splitting the obsidian stone beneath his claws. "This is not war," he roared, eyes wide with rage. "This is humiliation." On the planet below, resistance fighters watched the heavens, stunned. The battle, which should have lasted hours, had already tipped in minutes. And above them, the human ship was dancing, not chaotically, but mathematically. As if it could hear the rhythm of war, and had simply chosen a better song. In the void between stars, something had changed. War was no longer about size. Or numbers. Or fear. It was about understanding. Prediction. Precision. And in those things, humanity had become something terrifying. Not because they were violent. Victory wasn't the goal. Memory was. The battle slowed. Not because the Varnax had won. Not because the human ship was failing. but because something else, something far more dangerous than fire, was beginning. Inside the warship, beneath the layers of reactive armor and self-aware circuitry, a different system awakened. Not a weapon. Not a shield. A message. The ship turned, not toward another enemy, but toward the galactic plane, a position where its signal could reach far and wide. And then, it spoke. Not in language. In light. In memory. In truth. Across thousands of systems, from dead colonies to broken satellites, from deep bunkers to orbiting monasteries, dormant receivers flickered back to life. Encrypted frequencies long thought corrupted began to hum. Abandoned terminals lit up with a symbol, a fractured circle, slowly becoming whole. Then the images began. A planet burning. The soil split open, oceans turned to vapor. Civilians running beneath a red sky. The Varnax hovering overhead like gods of extinction. Another world, crumbling. Its leaders negotiating until the end. No resistance. No weapons. Just surrender. Still, the same result, silence. And then another. And another. And another. System after system. Hope erased. But now, every moment of that destruction was being played back in full, raw, unedited detail across the galaxy. Through walls. Through time delays. Through the blindness of fear. And woven between those memories, a single voice. Not angry. Not vengeful. Resolute. This ends now. Not in fire. But in truth. In the high citadels of fallen alliances, ambassadors wept. In underground resistance cells, old warriors stared at the signal like a ghost had returned. In forgotten ruins, where no life stirred, the light still reached. And for the first time in decades, the silence cracked. A transmission pinged back from the Nethari depths. Then from the Jalan Arc. Then the Estari cradle. Species thought extinct responded. We hear you. We are alive. We remember. On the surface of Velmara, the clouds broke. The citizens who had survived in silence, huddled beneath decaying temples and radiation-shielded bunkers, emerged to see the sky. Above them, in the bruised heavens, a symbol was projected. The emblem of Earth. Not as conquerors. Not as saviors. But as witnesses. A circle of light. Incomplete, but growing. Children pointed. Elders dropped to their knees. One girl, clutching a fragment of her family's crest, whispered. They're not gone. Someone stood up. And in orbit, the Varnax mothership trembled. Not from damage. But from internal collapse. The human ship had not attacked its engines. Nor its reactors. Instead, it had targeted the strategic core, a neural archive where Varnax stored centuries of war data, battle tactics, species profiles, cultural exploit logs. It was gone. Not destroyed. Erased. Like memory bleached from a mind. Commanders tried to access formation codes. They failed. Tried to reroute targeting systems. They failed. Entire sections of fleet coordination went dark, not from explosion, but from amnesia. The Varnax were no longer hunters. They were lost predators, stripped of their maps, their instincts, their script. The invincible became blind. Inside the Varnax command chamber, alarms spun with no direction. Screens showed nothing but flickering white. Tactical networks looped endlessly, trying to remember what they had once known. And in the center, their supreme strategist clawed at the console, screaming. We had them. We were. He paused. A look of confusion on his face. What were we doing here? He turned to his officers. None of them answered. Because none of them remembered. The war wasn't over. But the Varnax had forgotten how to fight it. And high above Velmara, the human warship turned once more, quiet, still nameless. No victory dance. No declaration. Only the slow withdrawal of energy fields, the fading pulse of light. And one final burst of data, echoing across every system it could reach. You are not alone. You were never alone. We remember. So you can begin again. They didn't just win. They changed what winning means. The war was over, but the echoes of its battle continued to hum across the galaxy. The human warship, the unknown vessel that had defied all expectations, vanished into the cold vacuum of space. No signals. No trace. Just silence. It was as though the ship had never existed at all. In the darkness of deep space, the absence of the warship became its own mark. There was no trace of the crew, no identification left behind to say who had piloted the ship. Only one thing remained, a single, unremarkable recording. A message, delivered not with words, but with a presence. We're not here to rule. Just to remind you who we are. The message wasn't a threat. It wasn't a declaration of power. It was simply a reminder. A whisper in the darkness. A promise that one day, the galaxy would remember the name of humanity. That the galaxy would remember that the humans had not come to conquer. They had come to show what was possible when strength wasn't built on subjugation, but on the belief that even in the darkest corners of space, kindness could be a weapon. The legend began. The tale of the ghost warship of Earth spread like wildfire through the galaxy. Across countless worlds, from the forgotten outposts to the ancient bastions of power, the story took root. It was spoken in hushed tones, whispered in taverns, and spread across encrypted comms networks. Stories of the ghost warship of Earth became a symbol, a tale of defiance, of one ship standing against an empire, and of a species that refused to be erased. Across the galaxy, no one knew who had commanded the ship. No one knew the name of the captain. Was it a military leader? A lone warrior? Or something else entirely? But the legend of the ship wasn't about who piloted it. It was about the truth that it left behind. The battle that had occurred, one that changed the course of history, wasn't taught in terms of tactics, victories, or losses. It was taught in terms of change. It became known as the battle that changed everything. The ship wasn't remembered because of its firepower or its destruction. It was remembered because it had forced the galaxy to rethink what it meant to win. The Academy of Galactic Strategy introduced the Battle of Velmara as a core module. It wasn't about the ships or the strategies used, it was about the concept of strategic humanity. It became a class in not just military strategy, but in philosophical warfare, showing that victory could come not through violence alone, but through understanding. The course was taught across all species, and each lesson focused not on what had been lost, but on what had been found. From the starfaring Xyanax to the insectoid Ketheri, from the aquatic Shalloy to the gaseous Zephyrians, the course had one central theme: what if war wasn't just about winning, but about redefining it? The ghost warship had proven that a single force, an individual ship, could change the course of history not with destruction, but with the sheer power of belief. And then, in the quietest corners of the galaxy, in places untouched by the formal halls of academia, the legacy of the ghost warship lived on in a far simpler form. On a small, forgotten moon at the edge of a star system, a child stood before a cracked piece of debris, an old, scavenged model. It was a rough replica of the human warship, crafted with nothing more than broken parts and the imagination of a young mind. The child's hands trembled slightly as they placed the model carefully on a makeshift shelf, where it stood as a symbol. The child's voice, soft but firm, echoed in the empty room as they stared at the ship in awe. One ship, and they stopped the unstoppable. The galaxy had changed. It wasn't just the warships, the alliances, or the galaxies won or lost. What had been truly transformed was the very idea of power. The human warship had not only erased the memory of the Varnax, it had redefined the galaxy's understanding of what it meant to win, to fight, and to rise against what seemed impossible. The ships were gone. The stars continued to turn. But the legacy of the ghost warship of Earth endured. A story passed on from generation to generation. A story about a single ship, one human ship, that had turned the tide not with force, but with a different kind of power. A power that still echoed in the universe, where light had been restored, and where memory had become the greatest weapon of all. The legacy was not one of might, but of memory. And through memory, a new future began. This is more than science fiction. This is the story of us, told through the eyes of those who never expected humanity to matter. If this story made you pause, made you feel, or made you wonder, like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes in impossible things. Because at HFY Sci-Fi Love and War Story, the next tale is already waiting. Will you be here when it begins?